It's Florida State versus Duke prediction time.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Prediction time, because today, even though it's Thursday, Duke game is on Friday night, 7 o'clock ESPN2, Florida State versus Duke in Durham, North Carolina. I want to go over what I think Florida State needs to do to win on offense. Most of it is with the passing game. There's a little bit with the run game I want to talk about. Then we'll go over some very important defensive keys that probably won't shock a lot of people with a little nuance. And then we'll get to the final score prediction. So let's start with the offense. With Brock Glenn making his second start of the season, I want to focus on him and what the passing game needs to do collectively. That's a word I could probably use a whole bunch in this podcast, because if they don't do it collectively, it shall not work. Passing game is harder than the run game for any level, for any quarterback, because there's so many things that has to go right. But to be honest, they exceeded my expectations. I don't know about everybody else in the first game against Clemson, and I think they have a chance to move forward and show signs of life, not only this season, but into the 2025 season. So the first thing I looked up when I started preparing for this pod was passing efficiency. Just stats that are kind of around that. And this is an interesting way to look at it. NCAA has different stats and CFB stats. You can use Pro Football Focus. There are a lot of different ways to look at it. But from my perspective, passing efficiency, are you hitting yards per play, whether it's per completion, per attempt, however you want to look at it? And I wanted to go a little different today, just to be somewhat different than I have in the past. Yards per completion. Right now, Florida State, and this is combined for everybody, is 12.08 for the season. That's 63rd in the nation. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not good either. They're a 134 team, so they're in the top half, but there's a lot to be desired there. Against Clemson, and this is just one game, and it's the first start for a redshirt freshman quarterback of the season, Brock Glenn went 23 of 41, 228 yards, 5.6 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Now, his 9.91 was per completion. So the drops that he had, like 4 drops, didn't help. But at the same time, that's Clemson's defense. I think that's the thing to look at. So grading it on that, I think minimum, both those stats could go up at least a yard, if not 2. Clemson's obviously got legitimate corners. And Florida State's going to have more time to pass against a team that doesn't have as much talent as Clemson in their front 7. And with their blitz bag, they do a nice job. I think a realistic total for the game against Duke, they got a good D, but they're not like dominant by any stretch on defense against the pass. It's more the run that I'm concerned about. Florida State could throw for 250 in this game. Shouldn't be a huge deal. I mean, they threw for 228 against Clemson. Asking for an extra 22 yards, that's like one play. Maybe 2 or 3 short passes, swing pass, whatever, check downs. That shouldn't be that hard. First off, it should be 250 because they should not drop the football. But I digress. If Florida State does not get to 250 in this game, I'm going to mark that as a below average grade, unless just shockingly they can just run the football down their throat. It's not going to happen. And they don't throw it much. Florida State is going to need to throw the football efficiently to beat Duke. And they've got to do it right out the gate and be consistent throughout the game. Again, efficiency. They can't have a quarter, and this has been totally Florida State's deal this year, where they're doing pretty good. Maybe they start out, I forget which game it was. They had like 12 carries for 66 yards, I think it was, in one of the games in the first quarter. And then they just went dry. They didn't end up with 100 yards for the game, even though they had 66 in the first quarter. That can't happen again. It was Boston College or something. I can't remember who it was. You have to be able to run the ball a little bit to help, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But it's just timing and rhythm. Now that you know Brock is the quarterback, now that you know who the lineup is, and there have been some changes, Hakeem is the main guy at one spot. Malik Benson may not get as many reps. They're trying different things. Obviously, Landon Thomas, Amari Williams, they should have a little bit more. I know it's not a lot of time, but everybody's kind of on the same page on who's going to at least be in the lineup. There should be improvement. To add to that, to get to 250, I'd like to see at least one big play, just flat out hit. They did take several shots. They did against Clemson, but because they couldn't run the ball at all, I mean, it was really bad. They didn't have as many chances with that, and they were throwing it up. They got penalties, etc., and they loosened Clemson's defense up, but they really didn't connect on them, except for the play Benson caught, and of course, there's a penalty. There must be completed down the field passes that just look natural. Florida State has to be able to do that, and it's not like they're lacking physical traits at receiver and tight end. They got skill. I'd also like to see Tofili be involved with this. At some point, he's got to break a screen. He had if I remember right, like a 40 or 50-yard touchdown last year on the screen. He's such a good player at making the first guy miss. I think that would be another way to do it. Two, to that point with Tofili, playing off of that, the screen game. I've heard it several times in the live chats that I've done here at Locked On Seminoles. I've brought it up, and it's just a fact. Florida State screens a lot. Why? The run game stinks. They don't trust their pass protection. They have to get it out quick. There's just not many options. So you're going to screen more than you would probably like. Well, you're certainly repping it a lot in games, so I assume you're repping it a lot in your practices. They have to be better at it in all phases. So the pass has to be more accurate. The blocking has to be way better. And then at the end of the day, this is what Florida State has been famous for. It's why I followed Florida State growing up. They had receivers that just made guys miss and made those wow plays. You can't tell me that Benson, Brown, Hakeem Williams, and well, just quite honestly, anybody, Kentron, I don't care which one, they're all elusive. And then you got Ja'Kai, who's the best receiver this year, hands down. That's his natural ability that everybody talks about. Ja'Kai Douglas is not fun to tackle in space. When is Florida State going to hit on a wide receiver screen? This is a good chance. Duke's a good defense. They're good, but they're not elite. You have to be able to, out of like the 10 times they're going to try it, and they're going to try, at least the original play call is going to be a screen, I'm guessing about 10 times in this game. One of those has to hit. If he audibles out of some and they run or do something different, it is what it is. They've got to be able to hit on some of these screen passes. Number 3, going back to the run game, and this drives me bananas. I've said it all week. Said it some last week. Even in the off week. They have to develop a bread and butter running play. Those passing plays I was talking about in the very first part of the podcast, downfield shots, your success rate will skyrocket. Skyrocket. If you are able to have a bread and butter running play, and then you use that same exact action and run bootleg and run play action. And you can even run quarterback runs off of it. You could run a naked boot, give him an option with the two-way go, or just down on the goal line, you could even run that same action. You see it every now and then with these extremely not very mobile quarterbacks, the guys that get rushing touchdowns. It's because the entire stadium knows the running back's getting it, and then he didn't. Brock Glenn's got pretty good wheels, but they don't use him a ton on that. I'll get to that in a minute. How about a naked in the red zone? Brock's got enough wheels to get outside and score. Maybe you can make it some kind of RPO. There's a lot of ways you can do it. I'd like to see some of that. But none of it works. None, unless you have a play the other team expects and respects because you can run the football. I'm talking 3+ yards a carry pretty much automatically. Lord only knows Florida State has not done that. They are literally dead last in the NCAA in rushing right now. Dead last. They have to find something with that. If they don't, how many more games will they win? 1 maybe? Forget the team like Charleston Southern maybe? You don't get that. I mean, you'll be lucky to win more than 2 games this year. At some point, that just has to happen. Now, they've got Early's moved to guard, so we'll see how that goes. I'm curious how healthy Darius is, if Mo is over the shanks with the snapping and all that. They just can't get these plays where they get behind the chains, and the running game doesn't have a chance. So those are some of the other little things they got to work out. But maybe the new lineup changes will help. I don't know, but that run game has to get rolling. With the run game, you've also got to do some things in the pass game off of it. And we're going to talk about a specific player that has to be that next here at Locked On Seminoles, because it's really important that receivers start to become a focal point in terms of like one or two, hopefully even a go-to guy. That's next at Locked On Seminoles. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. If you don't have a bread and butter running play, that's a problem. In similar fashion, if you don't have a go-to receiver, that is often a problem too. Right now, Florida State is trying to figure that out on the outside. You can say Ja'Kai Douglas, and I'm cool with that, but they need a perimeter receiver that the other team has to at least scheme against. How you do that is discretionary. There's nothing wrong with spreading the football around. I'm cool with that as well. Historically, though, the teams that dominate have go-to guys. Last year, ironically, Florida State didn't have one. They had two that were big-body guys on the perimeter. Now, Hakeem is starting to trend that way, but we need to see more of it. And then you also have Landon Thomas. And if you've got a go-to tight end, that's just as good, if not better. It's just really rare. But Florida State might be on to something. We'll come back to that a little bit, hopefully in the post-game show. I'm going to do something Saturday morning. I'm going to break down film, kind of go over it. But they really, really need to get something going with one of these outside guys so they can hit play action passes that are just go routes, obviously. But they also got to be more efficient in the red zone with throwing the football. That's why I want a bigger – like Ja'Kai is a great player, no question. But his size limits him in the red zone, especially when teams are blitzing and you got a lot of hands coming at you. You want to throw it up high to get it to somebody like Landon Thomas is 6'5". He's kind of like a receiver. He's a really big guy. That's fine. Amari, he's like 6'4". That's a very good athlete. I mean, he was 11-1 in the 100 meters at like 220 when he was a junior in high school. That's not normal, but that's who he is. Now the question is, can Florida State find a couple more guys to kind of push that pile forward and be consistent? We've talked about the drops. That has to go away. That's no good. And we've also talked about Florida State just kind of shooting itself in the foot a lot of times with this. Maybe a guy is open, but the pass protection's not there, et cetera. So it's not just the receiver and the quarterback getting on the same page. Passing game is complex. They just have to be more efficient with it. I know that's a really boring answer, but it's true. Coaches talk about we've got to execute. Fans hate it. It's just true. Little things change a play from going to an incompletion to a 63-yard touchdown like that. You have to be able to give him protection. So to that point, and this is something I'm going to guess a big no right now, how comfortable, let's say by middle of the second quarter, as the game goes along, quarterbacks, they can get a sense of the game and what's going to happen. How comfortable is Brock Glenn in the pocket? Meaning, is pass protection good enough? Part of that is on Brock. Let me be very clear. A lot of people just yell at the, hey, you got to block for the quarterback. He has to set the protection and or change the play to get into the right thing based on what the defense is going to do. Sometimes you can't tell. They just run up and they put themselves in base and they blitz out of a base package. Nobody's leaning. It is what it is. But most time teams don't even try to hide that they're blitzing. They want you to be intimidated, get out of your play, and or just make a stupid play and get a turnover. That is the objective. When you see all the guys crowding the line of scrimmage, you don't have that opportunity in your mind to change the play, or you're concerned, you use bad footwork, something like that. How comfortable is Brock? We're going to know a little bit more about him in general. And again, the lineup is changing. I want to see who actually plays, go over snap counts, etc. before I really do much. I may or may not do an extremely late live show Friday night, not sure. But I want to go over stuff before I do because they've changed the lineup. They've got new receivers, new alignment. It's complex. That doesn't even count Amari and Landon. But Brock's comfort is going to dictate whether or not these passing plays work. Next, you've got to be able to hit something in the RPO game. A little bit of that, obviously. The run game it's got to work some. But the big part with this, do they allow Brock to run a few times? They're not going to admit it, and I don't blame them. I always say that, coaches lie at press conferences. They can't afford for Glenn to go down. Then you would have A, one scholarship quarterback left, and B, he is a true freshman in Luke Krummenhoff. He's my guy. I've known him for years. Really good player, but true freshman behind center is bad. There are extremely, extremely few exceptions with that, especially in a passing offense. Option football days, 1985, Oklahoma, when it won a national title with a quarterback that was a freshman, they're over. So, to that point, they've got to let him get outside a little bit. He has to be able to be smarter about getting down. This is the maturity of a quarterback, but if they can do that and he can run a little bit, that'll not only help the rushing average, it will loosen up what the defense for Duke does. Manny Diaz is a good defense coordinator. I don't think he's a great head coach. He's a really good defense coordinator. They're going to have something for this, and I doubt we're going to see Florida State get the edge a ton, but if it's there, even if it's just 120-yard chunk play, something like that he gets, plus, just running out of the pocket if there's a hole, take off, that's fine. Get down. He cannot take hits. What I'm asking for is almost impossible. Openly admit it, it still has to happen. They've got to get some yards out of him in the run game, and when he does throw in the RPO, they got to maximize. They've been iffy on that this year, but even DJ hits some. Curious to see what Brock can do. Finally, you got to get him to the edge, even if it's not an RPO or naked, just to get the ball to Landon in Amari, like those little short passes. You see everybody do it. It's a version of the West Coast. Fullbacks, tight ends, receiver that goes in motion that comes back out. There's a million ways to do it. They just need to be efficient with it. I know that's another kind of boring answer, but those little 3-4 yard passes with the athletes that Florida State now has at tight end, or a guy like Ja'Kai Douglas, can be a 30-yard play really, really quick. I'm curious to see how well Florida State executes that. Now, defensively, this is where I'm really curious. There aren't many things I want to talk about, but these are straightforward. Number one, consistent run defense. How many times does Duke get a 10, maybe even a 15-yard run play? If they're getting 20-yard, chunk yard runs, this game ain't going to be close. Malik Murphy's going to hit some passes. I'll talk about him in a second. But they have to slow them down, and it has to be consistent. Florida State's been pretty good with the, shall we say, spectacular run defensive plays. They're one of the best teams in the country in tackles for loss, but they still suck against the run because they're so bad at either A, not slowing down the quarterback on undesigned quarterback runs out of the pocket, RPO, designed quarterback runs, and then just completely whiffing on run gap fits. Stuff that they talk about at the 6th grade level. I was at a high school practice the other day. That's one of the first things that the guy as a head coach told me. They were playing a team that this weekend that doesn't have a win, but they're athletic. He said, as long as we're good with our run gap fits, we should be fine. Well, Florida State certainly isn't. That must change. 2, I just mentioned tackles for loss. Something Florida State does very well. There are many of those take advantage. Duke's offensive line's okay. They're not great. You had 12 tackles for loss against Cal. 7 sacks. I'm not asking for that. Cal's offensive line is from hunger. They're bad. But that does not mean you couldn't get 6 or 7 by the middle of the 3rd quarter. And if you're fortunate enough, part of this is going to be on the offense. And if the offense is terrible, what I'm about to ask is not going to happen. But if you're going to play in a close game or you have the lead in the 3rd quarter, this should be a pretty close game. There's no reason that you can't get to 10 tackles for loss. Florida State is more athletic. They're coming off a bye, and you know what Duke is. They're not trying to hide who they are. They don't have a mobile quarterback. They need to run the football in a more traditional manner. I think 10 tackles for loss is legitimately on the table. Minimum 8 is what I'm asking. Again, Murphy not being mobile and not being a natural RPO guy that takes off should help them. He'll go get you 5 once in a while, but he's not as athletic as Brock or Luke, somebody like that. Certainly not as much as Jordan Travis. Next, this is one that all Florida State fans are going to cheer for. No busts in the secondary. And allow me to explain but what I mean by busts. Last week, Clemson, or 2 weeks ago, Clemson game. That bomb that went for a touchdown early in the game into double coverage was not a good passing decision. Don't wrap up, shoulder bump. The other guy doesn't make a play on the ball. They run into each other off the hit of the receiver. The receiver bounces, keeps his feet, and scores. Ridiculous. That is a bust of its own kind. Number one, it should have been a pick. Two, the guy in the back, I forget which one it was, he didn't even go for the ball. Three, I think it was Conrad Hussey, but whoever it was, tackle through the ball with your arms. No shoulder bump. Drive through the midsection of the offensive player. That is a bust all around. Obviously, giving up a touchdown is never good. But they scored on a play they shouldn't have even thrown the football to that guy. There cannot be any of those. And then the pass-offs. So what are pass-offs? Linebacker to safety or linebacker to corner. Florida State's had too many things where a guy comes across one side to the other, or a player is going from one zone to the next and they pass off, and there's some kind of error. Maybe even a bust straight up on who had a guy. This is major college football. It only takes one or two of those a game, and it's not like it's every play. But when Florida State has them, teams have capitalized, as they should. They can't have those this week. Malik Murphy's got a cannon for an arm. Short, intermediate, deep, it won't matter. He doesn't even hardly have to set his back foot. His arm is special. If you give him a little bit of time and there's any kind of bust, that's a big play. He has NFL potential long-term. He's still a little slow developing in the plays and understand everything. His first year at Duke. He's played 2 years at Texas. But he has a lot of talent. Cannot allow busts. Make him earn everything. The good news, per play, Duke is terrible. And again, it's part of it is Malik is still processing. But we're to the back half of the season. He's been through a bye week. He's probably going to be a little better. If you give him any freebies, that ain't going to end well. It is not. So, last thing, before I go into prediction here in a few minutes, turnovers. Florida State, I think they're 129th in the nation in turnovers. It's terrible. Terrible. They've created 3, I believe. Terrible. And it's so bizarre with the quarterback that's inexperienced, rushing the passer the way they do, and being able to get tackles for loss. Minimum 2 turnovers should be expected in this game. When we come back, I'm going to give my prediction for Florida State at Duke. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but they might even be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Florida State, I think, will go back and forth in this game. I think there's even a good chance that they'll be leading in the third or fourth quarter. Now the big question is, and there's no evidence one way or the other, can Florida State in a flip-flop game, meaning like it's 24-21, something like that, maybe it's 17-14 in the third quarter, whatever it may be, can they make a special play? It may even be special teams. I didn't talk about that. In Florida State, the punter, Mastromanno, like, he could be the MVP of this game if he can pin Duke deep with 4 minutes to go. You get a 3 and out, and then you get the ball at midfield, and then Fitz gets a chance to kick a 48-yard field goal at the gun, something like that. Why not? It's certainly possible. However you get it done, what is the clutch play? Maybe there's multiple, and often one stacks to the next. Defense, special teams play, a couple good runs, a screen, get it down to the 30-yard line, you kick a 48-yard field goal, you go home happy. That's what I'm talking about. I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game because I don't have much faith in Malik Murphy yet either. Again, their EPA, like yards per play, expected, points per attempt is what it really stands for, but they're like 125, Duke is. They're bad. I think he's going to take a little step forward, and I think Brock will too. The off week and all that will help. But I still don't think these offenses are going to just roll it up. If it ends up being 30, 35, 31, I will be openly admitting after that game that I was wrong. I think it's going to be closer than that. And I also think it's going to be down to the last 3 minutes on who wins this football game. I still like Duke because they're at home over Florida State. I'm going to pick them 27-24. I think this will be a nip and tuck game. And again, I think Florida State will lead at some point, but they have to prove to me that they are going to be able to win a game like this. They did against Cal at home. Now can you do something like that with A, new quarterback, and B, it being on the road? Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me, and it's a great time to be checking out football. Besides the Florida State Duke game Friday night, a lot of great games this weekend, so make sure you check those out. It's a lot of fun. And also, check out my guys, Alex Dono, Kent Gibbs on Locked On ACC. ACC is pretty wild this year. It's pretty fun. I just like following some of it. Virginia's better than I thought they would be. Obviously, Virginia Tech is a team that's hard to figure out. There's a lot of stuff going on. So make sure you check out Locked On ACC as well. Everybody have a good one, and I will see you soon.